Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Dani, and today I have a very cool beginning of a series to share with you. In the day that you're seeing this video, it's exactly 1 month before my 30th birthday. So yeah, I'm going to turn 30 on December 7th of this year, and I started to think about my reading and about age. You know how it is, you reach like these milestones in life and you start thinking about things. I actually don't have this thing in my head, like things that I have to do by the time that I'm 30 or something like that. I don't have that, but I thought it would be fun to think about all the things and authors and books that I haven't read yet that I definitely do want to read. I thought about doing 30 books to read before I'm 30, but I had this idea too late in the year, so I would not be able to read 30 books before I was 30. So this is what we got to. Instead of 30 books before I'm 30, it's 30 after I'm 30. So I split this in 3. So first in this video, I'm going to talk about 10 authors that I want to read after I'm 30. In the second part, I'm going to talk about 10 classics that I want to read after I'm 30. And then in the third part, I'm going to talk about 10 more contemporary novels, more recent novels that I also want to read after I'm 30. So let's start. This video is about authors that I haven't read or that I've read one thing and I want to read a lot more. So just 10 authors that I want to read from now on in my life, at some point in my life. The first one is the one that I want to read the most, and then the 10th one is the one that, from this list, that's all the authors that I do want to read. The 10th one is the one that I want to read the least. And I also have a special mention for most of these videos. But in number 10, I'm already cheating here, but in number 10 I have more than one author, and it is Russian authors. So I put them together in number 10 because honestly I haven't read any Russian literature and like classic literature, so I don't even know which one I should start with or like what's the difference between them. We have like Crime and Punishment and War and Peace, and I literally don't know what these books are about, and just the titles sound too similar for me to differentiate one from the other. So I'm really sorry if these are your favorite books, but I'm trying. I want to read these books at some point in my life. They are very intimidating, and that's why they are in the 10th spot. Even if I am curious about it, it's not what I typically read, so definitely intimidating. But Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, all that, I am so curious to know what it's all about. And I do think from the status that they got in our world that they must be phenomenal books, but definitely intimidating. I know they have shorter novels, both like, these two authors, but also a lot of other Russian authors that I won't remember the name, probably. So if you have any suggestions on where I should begin, I know, like I said, I know they have shorter novels, so maybe I should start there. But at the same time, should I just like keep reading a lot of stuff that are not as good as the big ones, as War and Peace and Crime and Punishment? I don't know, but I am curious and I do want to read this authors in some point in my life. In number 9, it's another author that I am so intimidated about reading his books because, again, not what I typically read, usually very long and dense books, and they are considered some of the best literature in the world. So in 9th place is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I am so curious to read his books, but again, 100 Years of Solitude, it's like, it looks like it would take me 100 years to read. So I don't know if I should start with that. Love in the Time of Cholera is also, they're also very, I think they're more well-known and more popular in Brazil than they are here. And one other issue that I have with him, that I have with myself, like it's something that is just for me, is that I have a hard time reading translations, especially after I started reading books in English. And when I read the translated copy to Portuguese, it's very jarring for me, some of the translations and some of the choices that the translator made. So when I think about reading 100 Years of Solitude, for example, I'm like, I'm not going to read that in Spanish because I don't speak Spanish. So which translation should I choose? Should I read it in English? Should I read it in Portuguese? It doesn't really matter in the end if I'm not reading the original one. So I just postponed it and I never read it, and I don't know what I should do. I think for these books in Spanish, there are others here in this list, or maybe in other videos. I would definitely, I don't know, I would probably prefer to read them in Portuguese, because as the languages are more similar, I think the translation would be better in Portuguese. But at the same time, I've had a lot of issues with translations to Portuguese, to Brazilian Portuguese, at least. So I don't know. But I do want to read his novels. I do want to read his works. And that's why he's in number 9. Very intimidating, and I don't know in what language to read it. In number 8, we have finally some fantasy and sci-fi, I think, with Ursula K Le Guin. I've heard amazing things about her books, but also usually people don't talk about them being fun to read, but more about how important and how developed and all of that, how good they are and how good they are written and things like that, not necessarily fun. So that's why it's intimidating. I think I tried to start reading The Left Hand of Darkness at some point in my life, and the first 10 pages were just so confusing. It's just a lot of names and things that I didn't know what was going on, so I just put it away and didn't keep reading it. I think I had an ebook at the time. So yeah, that's one that I think I want to read the most because it's the most popular. But if you think I should start with any of the others, please let me know. I don't really know. She's a very big name, and again, I don't know if it's fantasy or sci-fi. I should probably know that. But she's a really big name in the fantasy sci-fi genre, and I do want to read more women from classic women stories, classic stories written by women. So definitely something that I want to read after I'm 30. Then in number 7, we are still in the fantasy written by women, classics fantasy written by women, and the author here is Tamara Pierce. I've heard, again, only amazing things, and her books, people actually say how fun they are and how cool they are to read, especially as a child. I'm past that. This is for me to read after I'm 30. So I don't know if it even makes sense now, but I do want to read it. I do want to know what it's all about, what her books are all about, and I think it's something that I want to have in my background as knowledge of a specific author. That was very important for so many people, for writing about young women in fantasy. I've heard bad reviews also of her books, but mostly they're all positive. So very, very curious. I thought about starting with the Lioness Quartet, but I don't know if it's the best way to start, the best place to start. But I do want to read her older books because I'm more curious about them. But if you have suggestions of other places to start in her books, I would definitely love to know. In number 6, please don't go away, I have Stephen King. I have only read Carrie by him a long time ago. I don't remember most of it. Well, I remember because everyone knows about Carrie, but I haven't read anything else. I have some books of his here. I have Mr. Mercedes and Under the Dome, which I'm curious to read, but again, why do I only have the really big books? But I'm really curious to read his works. I'm very, not necessarily intimidated because I don't think they are difficult to read, but also I know that usually his endings are not really good, and people say that the whole story is good, then the ending is bad, and that makes me not want to pick up his books, because why am I going through all of this to have a bad ending? But I mean, he's an important person in literature right now, and now there's just way too many books to choose from, and I don't know where to start. I literally don't know where to start. I've heard great things of The Long Walk. I don't want to read it right now, honestly, but I don't know. The Shining, maybe? I don't know where to start. If you have any suggestions, let me know. I thought about Pet Sematary also. It sounds good, but I don't... Well, it's called Pet Sematary, and I can't read it when it's things about animals, so probably not the best book for me. But if you have suggestions, I think this is the one that people have more suggestions. But yeah, I haven't read any more of Stephen King, and I really want to. I really want to know what his type of horror is like. In number 5, there's an author that I have read 2 books by her before, but they were non-fiction, and I specifically want to read her fiction works, and it's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have read We Should All Be Feminists and Dear Joelle by her, and I love them, and I've heard amazing things about her fiction. So I think Americana and Purple Hibiscus are the ones that are more popular. I don't know if she has written any other like novels, so if you do have any other to recommend, let me know. But those 2 are definitely some that I want to pick up sooner rather than later, because I'm very curious. And again, not what I necessarily usually read, but I'm just too curious about it, and I think I want to hear her voice in the stories, because I really love her nonfiction, so I think I will definitely love her fiction as well. And now in 4th place, the author is Terry Pratchett. I read 1 book by his, and was co-authored with Neil Gaiman, which is Good Omens, and I enjoyed the humor in that book so much, and from the little that I know about his works, it's very funny and like absurd in that way. So I'm really curious, and I basically just want to know what this world is all about. But again, too many books. I've read online suggestions of where to start in this world, but it feels like a big commitment, so I don't know, but I'm so interested in his books and in his writing, and I feel like it's definitely going to be right up my alley, his type of humor and his writing and all that absurd stuff. So I'm really curious, so that's why he's in number 4. In number 3, we have another author that I've read 1 book by her before, and is N.K. Jemisin. Actually, I read 1 book and 1 short story. I read The City We Became and Emergency Skin, which is a short story that she wrote, and I just loved so much the way she writes and the way she addresses important topics in her writing in a very seamless, but at the same time you can't miss it way. So I'm really curious to read her other books. Definitely Broken Earth, the Broken Earth trilogy is one that it's on the top of my list for sure, but she has so many other books, and like she has 2 other full series, which is 100,000 Kingdoms and Dream Blood, and also 1 book of short stories, which is How Long Till Black Future Month, and I want to read all of them. I really like her short stories, so I think the book of short stories would definitely be something that I would enjoy, and probably other than that, I would start with Broken Earth, because there's just so much hype and so much love for the series that I really think I'm going to love it as well. In number 2, it might be very unexpected what I put here, but it's definitely an author that I want to read so soon. I wanted to read this year, but I just couldn't because the book that I wanted to buy was too expensive and I wanted to wait for a sale or something. But it's non-fiction as well, so probably very unexpected, but it's Stephen Hawking. I haven't read any of his non-fiction yet. I really will, and I really want to, but I want to learn more. Like I mentioned this before on my channel, I want to read more about science and about the universe, and I really have fun with all of that. I read Neil deGrasse Tyson this year, and it was really cool, and I want to read Stephen Hawking as well. He has so many books about so many different things in physics. The one that I mentioned that I really wanted was A Brief History of Time, but the illustrated edition, because I have a really hard time visualizing things that I'm reading for abstract concepts like physics and the universe and things like that. Not when I'm reading novels, but when I'm reading abstract concepts, I really have a hard time visualizing. So I really wanted to get the illustrated edition, which is very expensive. So that's why I didn't buy it yet. And I don't know, I feel like I should start with that one before going to his other books. And then I didn't read anything. But definitely one author that I'm going to read after I'm 30. And then in number 1, and before I say who it is, I want to remind you that there is an honorable mention that I'm going to mention in the end. So don't go away after this one. But in number 1, the one author that I should have read books by her already. And I'm so curious. I so want to know what it's all about. And I have some of her books, but again in Portuguese, and I want to read them in English. and that's Jane Austen. It's just classical literature in its highest. It's books and stories that everyone knows about, and people comment and mention there's so much pop culture that was inspired by her books, and I feel like I will really enjoy them when I give it time. I tried to read Sense and Sensibility a few years ago, again in the Portuguese, which I didn't want to, but it was really hard. The writing style is not something that I'm used to, so something that I definitely have to keep pushing, which I didn't at the time because I wanted to eventually read it in English, so I didn't read it. I haven't read a single Jane Austen, and I really want to. I also wanted to have like a cute, like pretty collection of her books, but they're also expensive, the ones that I found online, so I don't know. I don't know which one to start with. I don't know anything. I have watched Pride and Prejudice a long time ago. I remember I enjoyed it, but I don't even remember the story by this point, which would be awesome to read the book because I would be surprised by everything that happens. But I have to get those books in English so I can read them. But definitely I am going to read Jane Austen after I'm 30. That's happening. And then the honorable mention here is an author that I love, and I've read a lot of her works, but she just wrote too much. And there's still way too much that I want to read. I want to read all of her books. Like, I wanted to make this goal, or at least a challenge for myself, to read all of her books. And that's Agatha Christie. She writes exactly the type of thrillers and mysteries that I like to read. And I just wanted to read all of her books. There are some that I love, there's some that I didn't like. For example, Death and Denial is a book that I didn't like so much. The Clocks I read this year. I love that. I loved it so much, and it's one that's not as well known, I feel like, because there's not a big movie about it yet. But there's just so much from her to read, and I wanted to read all of her books. All of them. That's why she's here. I wanted to put her in one of the 10 spots in the list, but I felt like it was unfair because I've already read so much of her work. But she's definitely an honorable mention. I want to read all of Agatha Christie's work from now on in my life. Let me know what are some authors that you want to prioritize in your life and that you want to read. And if you have a specific age, a specific year to do that, like me, like what would that be? I would be very curious to know. Remember, there's a part 2 and 3 of this video coming up next week and the week after that. But those are some of the authors that I want to read in the next few years. Let me know if you have read any of them and if you would recommend somewhere to start or your favorite books by these authors, because I would definitely highly appreciate all of those suggestions. And remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And thank you so much for joining me.